Hey there, this is Joe Gilmore, and welcome to the video version of my blog on War for the Planet of the Apes. I posted this back in 2017, and you can see it at batshitcave.blogspot.com. Now, why am I coming back to this today? Why does this matter in March of 2021? Well, if you haven't seen any of my other videos or you haven't read any of my blogs, you have to get yourself in a different state of mind here in order to appreciate the points I'm going to make and the relevance that they are going to have with what's going on today. So you're going to have to put on your tinfoil hat for a minute, and I'm going to read you a quote from George Lucas to try to set up the proper frame of reference here. The whole thing in Star Wars was to take psychological ideas from social issues, political issues, spiritual issues, and condense them down to an easy to tell story. The crudest part of that in terms of the religious spiritual thing is some people have taken those ideas and distorted them, and you end up in a cult where they're using the psychological tools to make you adhere to their society. And part of it is they need to keep it closed. So this is coming from the inventor of probably the biggest, most influential film franchise in the world. And if you go look at his interviews over the years, he's very open about the idea, the fact that he was interested in influencing the minds of people, and going way back to the 70s when he did his first Star Wars movie. And even before that, he was doing films. He did American Graffiti, which was not a science fiction movie at all. But his disarming demeanor and his kind of benevolent, there's a benevolent energy he sort of projects. And he's not someone whose words we should take lightly when he is so graphic and talking about some cult using psychological tools to make you adhere to their society. Really? Using entertainment films to make you adhere to their society? Is he serious? Well, if we take this point of view and we look at something like King Kong, one of the early monster movies, this came out in the 30s, and what do we have here? We've got a giant animal who's going crazy, who's just angry and just coming right at us, and wanting to destroy the city and wanting to rape and pillage. Now, is this what apes do? No, they hang out in the forest. They don't want to be bothered. I mean, if you get too close to them, they might feel threatened and attack you, but generally they're peaceful. They want to be left alone. They don't want to come out and attack you. So that's one way that it's not a realistic creature. And another way is look how giant it is. It's bigger than all these buildings. It's just this impossibly huge, fantastic, scary creature. It's not real. That's because it's supposed to represent something in our psyche, something we fear, a foreigner coming from across the water, a powerful foreigner who's going to change society, who's going to destroy our way of life, who's going to mix with our beautiful women and dilute our gene pool and pollute us. And so it's a very potent metaphor. And you don't even have to think about all that to be entertained by it. You just watch it and you go, wow, that's cool. But you probably don't think about all the different things I just told you. They maybe did back then, back in a time where they didn't have as much distraction. But we can see here it was used in propaganda posters. So you see coming from across the water, so he's a foreigner, right? He's raping her and ravaging her, and he's beating us over the head with his culture. He's going to destroy our culture and bloody us to the point where we don't have a culture anymore. And he's got this funny little mustache. He's supposed to represent some guy. I can't remember who he's supposed to represent, but I believe this image was used in more than one propaganda campaign. So, but what's it doing here? It's getting you all worked up. So you got to go sign up. You got to go fight these bastards, right? So that's the point of propaganda. It's trying to get your feelings riled up, and so you go out there and do something. Well, if we take that idea and we apply it to film, we can kind of see what George Lucas was talking about. So if you're driving down the street back in 2017, or I think that's when this came out, and you see this billboard, you only have a minute to look up. So what do you see? You see the word war. It's in capital letters. It's being shouted at you. So the first thing they're selling is a war. That's the most important thing about this poster. And what's it up against? It's up against a storm. It looks like snow, right? A blizzard. So it's a white storm. And the red color kind of catches your eye because, red lights, you got to stop. Fire engine, the lights on a emergency vehicle, or blood. In a war, there's a lot of blood, right? Or in really bad wars, there is. And blood on snow looks pretty striking, doesn't it? It looks very violent. It's a very striking contrast. So we have the idea of war and blood and a white storm. And what's coming out of the white storm? There's this dark figure coming out of the white storm. So let's take a closer look at this dark figure. Oh, okay, so it's the whole King Kong thing, right? You've got an ape, you've got a pretty young, very young girl, a white girl with blonde hair, and her name is Nova. And Nova means new, as in a new star, like supernova, as in light, as in bright, as in white. So she's white, and this dark figure here, he's the King Kong archetype, but he's been modernized, he's been refined to be even more human. In fact, part of the plot is these apes, these chimps and apes, they're becoming more and more human because of a simian flu virus. And this virus is making them more smart and making them able to talk and use sign language, and who knows, maybe mate with humans too at some point. But it's also, it's a what do they call it? A trans-species virus. It's a virus that can be transferred between humans and primates. So humans are getting it too, but it's making them stupid. It's making them devolve. So it's making apes evolve, and it's making humans devolve very quickly. Not over thousands of years, but over the course of a few years, or maybe months. And his name is Caesar. He's the king of he's the smartest one, right? And Caesar is a title. It means king or leader. And same with Tsar, T-S-Z-A-R or T-Z-A-R, as in the Russian Tsar, and Kaiser. Kaiser, Caesar, Tsar, they all mean ruler or king. So think of King Kong. So we've got, they're just refining it for modern usage here. And he's coming from the war, and he's looking at you, and he's bringing the war to you. And is she kicking and screaming? No, we don't have, the woman is not being violated now. Now she's willfully going with the beast, the scary foreigner from across the water, right? So another level to this poster is the symbolism. Now, W-A-R, this looks like an A, right? But he's covering it up, isn't he? So you could also say that it's a trapezoid. Look at it. That's a trapezoid. Top's cut off, bottom's cut off. These two sides are uneven, or they're slanted. So look here, trapezoid. That's the bottom of a pyramid. It's a pyramid with the top cut off. And the reason the top is cut off is because that's where the all-seeing eye is. And that's where the 1% hangs out that control society. The bottom part represents the different structures that they use to control us. And we're probably way down here somewhere with the apes. We are the apes. It's the planet of the apes, right? It's the war for the planet of the apes. So these people at the top here, they want to give us a war. It's a war for the planet of the apes. It's for us. And they're invisible because you're not supposed to see them, because the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist, right? So they're kind of snickering, ha ha ha, you can't see what we're doing, but we're pulling all the strings. It really is that diabolical. I mean, I believe it is. And apparently George Lucas kind of suspects it too. Some people have taken those ideas and distorted them, and you end up in a cult. What is this cult? Is he talking about the Illuminists here? Is he just calling them right out? Is he one of them? Is he a messenger from one of them? Is he their mild-mannered, good cop that sort of gives us a hint? Now, War for the Planet of the Apes has some interesting nods to a film called Apocalypse Now. Now, it's definitely not a remake at all, and it's not even the same story, but there are some symbolic similarities. And Hollywood Reporter, in fact, said it's pretty obvious that War for the Planet of the Apes borrows thematic elements from Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. That ape Apocalypse Now graffiti in the middle of the movie is a none too subtle hint. So I know what scene he's talking about. I tried to find a snapshot of it, but I couldn't find it. But there is this scene where there's all this mayhem going on, and all of a sudden you're staring at this wall, and it's in graffiti. It says Ape Apocalypse Now. I thought it was hilarious. But I was already suspicious that this was borrowing heavily from Apocalypse Now. I was already seeing it. Although it's decidedly more campy and a lot less sophisticated in its cinematic quality. I mean, because Apocalypse Now, that's considered one of the great war movies of all time. And I would agree with that. Francis Ford Coppola, he also did the Godfather movies. So Woody Harrelson, he's supposed to be sort of roughly based on Marlon Brando's character. And Marlon Brando's character, Colonel Kurtz, he's based on Colonel Kurtz from the Heart of Darkness novella by Joseph Conrad, which came out in the late 1900s. Now, Apocalypse Now took this story and put it in the setting of the Vietnam War. So they drastically changed the story. But the original story took place in the African Congo. And this character of Colonel Kurtz, he was actually based on a historical person that actually existed, Leon Rom. And here he is depicted in a Tarzan movie. So this story kind of bleeds over into other films and other stories. It is widely believed that Kurtz was based upon a ruthless Belgian imperialist named Leon Rom, born in Belgium 1859, and spent much time in the Congo during the height of European imperialism there. Rom became most famous for the alleged brutality of his administration in the Stanley Falls area, which is in the African Congo. According to contemporary reports from white missionaries, Rom had used the severed heads of 21 Congolese to decorate the flower beds of his house at Stanley Falls. He is also said to have kept a gallows permanently in place at his station. These atrocities committed by Rom are echoed in Apocalypse Now and War for the Planet of the Apes in the form of mutilated bodies which decorate the colonel's outpost. This is from a rubber plantation around the same time in the Congo. And you can see these black slaves, they're all chained up brutally. And they've got blacks who are turncoats who are overseeing them. All right, so this is the setting of the original story that both of these films are based upon. So notice where they're at. They're in Africa, in the Congo. So now we have a very serious question to ask ourselves. Who do the apes represent? Who are they supposed? We know that it's King Kong, that Caesar is King Kong, but who are all these other apes that are chained up and being beaten down and whipped and building this wall that Woody Harrelson's character is enslaving and making them do all this work? And at his station there, the same station that Colonel Kurtz had Congolese heads surrounding, the same station that Woody Harrelson's character has all these crucified apes around. Who do you think those apes are supposed to represent? We're going to see very clearly in a moment. And Woody Harrelson, he knew very well that this film was based upon, originally inspired by themes from Heart of Darkness. Here's a quote from Woody Harrelson. Whether you want to say it's from Apocalypse Now or the real source, Heart of Darkness, was an amazing guide. My initial talks with Matt Reeves were about, let's not let this guy be too black and white, just pure evil. Let's really show his conflicts and what he went through. So he's talking about his own character, that he didn't want him to be too black and white. He wanted him to be more complex. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if he's trying to be like Marlon Brando, he's a conflicted character. I mean, look at his expression here. Look at this expression. You call that a black and white character? He's incredibly conflicted. And if you watch the movie, he's a very abstract character, hard to pin down. So Woody Harrelson's statement doesn't really make a lot of sense there. Let's not let this guy be too black and white, just pure evil. So now, I don't believe that these actors, a lot of them, ever stop acting. I think that they're still acting when they're doing interviews. I think especially when they're doing interviews for a film, Part of their job is to make sure that people perceive the film or the piece of entertainment in a certain light, especially when controversies might be surrounding it. They need to guide the audience attention and reassure them, no, no, it's not that, it's this. No, 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 we're not saying that. This is how you're supposed to. No, no. So we don't want this guy to be too black and white, just pure evil, because black and white is just pure evil, right? Don't mix black and white. No, that's not what he's saying. Or is it? Or is that what he's really saying? Who is Woody Harrelson? The mild-mannered, disarming bartender from Cheers. Well, he's the son of a murderer. He's the son of Charles Harrison. This guy was a murderer for hire, and he went on a little murder mission with his wife, Joanne. You remember that film Natural Born Killers that Woody Harrelson was in? And he claimed to be the one who assassinated John F. Kennedy. And if you want to read more about this interesting topic, read what Jim Marrs has to say about this whole topic. Jim Marrs is a very interesting writer. He's dead now, unfortunately. But I highly encourage you to look into this. And I highly encourage you to wonder who these actors are for real. So we're talking about the African Congo as far as the original source. And Woody Harrelson knows this because he says right here, the real source, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Now, when Heart of Darkness came out, it was controversial. In fact, I got this from Wikipedia. Heart of Darkness is criticized in post-colonial studies, particularly by Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe. In his 1975 public lecture, An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Achebe described Conrad's novella as an offensive and deplorable book that dehumanized Africans. Achebe argued that Conrad blinkered with xenophobia, incorrectly depicted Africa as the antithesis of Europe and civilization, ignoring the artistic accomplishments of the Fang people who lived in the Congo River Basin at the time of the book's publication. Since the book promoted and continues to promote a prejudiced image of Africa that depersonalizes a portion of the human race, he concluded that it should not be considered a great work of art. Now, not everyone agrees with this assessment. That some people believe this guy missed the point, that it was actually trying to expose the horrors of the imperialists and what they were doing. And Marlon Brando, one of the last things he says before he dies in Apocalypse Now, he says, the horror, the horror. So I'm going to ask you the question again. Who are the apes supposed to represent in this film? Well, let's ask this guy. You know, he looks smart. He's anti-racist. He's black. Let's ask him. Who does he think the apes represent? So this is a guy for this global grind TV thing. So they sit down and they're kind of like, giving each other the high five or knuckle bumping and kind of like, yeah, we don't want none of that. We're on the same team. We're on the same plate here, on the same page. So look at this question that this guy asks Woody Harrelson. Another scene that touched me was when Caesar gets whipped, and he's giving me that Denzel glory, but he gives it a little bit of reaction. Filming that part, like, how was that day on set? Because whipping in America is a big thing. All right. Now, did you hear what he just said? He just compared Caesar, the ape, the King Kong little guy. He just compared an ape in the film getting whipped to Denzel Washington, a black actor, getting whipped in glory. Getting whipped because he's a slave. He's comparing a black slave to the ape, the chimp. And he's not saying it's a bad thing. He's saying it touched him and that he gives it a little bit of reaction. What's he talking about here? He's comparing a chimp to a black slave, and he thinks that's okay. And he thinks racism is bad, but he thinks that's okay to depict in a movie. And here's right before it happens. And this guy here, Red, does it. And Red is a turncoat. He's a donkey. He's an Uncle Tom. And look, they're all chained up just like the Belgian slaves in the Congo. They're all chained up in some of those horrible pictures. We'll look at another one in a minute. These are supposed to be black slaves. they're using chimps and apes, and they're using it as a metaphor for black slaves, and that's okay. Nobody was offended by this. This guy thinks it's just great. Now he's talking about the movie Glory, but there's actually a much more horrifying scene in the movie 12 Years a Slave, and this is exactly the same thing, as even more accurate to what happens in War for the Planet of the Apes. He makes one of the apes whip the other, and they're all slaves, and it's a gut wrenching scene. He says, "How was that day on set? Because whipping in America is a big thing." What are you talking about? Whipping in America is a big thing. Maybe it was back in the slave era when slaves got whipped. Yeah, that was a big thing. But he's talking about it like it's today. What script is this guy reading from? Who is this guy? Who are these journalists? Who pays him to say this crap? All right, so in this interview with Andy Serkis, he's the guy inside playing Caesar. He's the guy who hunches over and plays the weird creature in all these movies. He plays Gollum in Lord of the Rings, and he plays Ulysses Claw in Black Panther. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But Andy Serkis, he's in a lot of different things, and he usually plays like a creature or something, animatronic creature. But in this interview, he says there are turncoat apes, basically. They've gone to work for the humans, and they're treated appallingly. They're like slaves in actual fact. They're really badly taken care of, and they're called donkeys. They carry weapons, and they haul stuff around, and they cook food for the humans. They're literally like slaves. All right, so that's this guy. He's talking about this guy here, Red, the turncoat, just like I said earlier. He says they're like slaves in actual fact. And then he says it again at the end. They are literally like slaves. Is Andy Serkis reading from a scripture? Why does he want us to associate so strongly these turncoat apes with slaves? He uses the word twice. History. In fact, there's a scene where they're chained up, Caesar and his buddies, and they go inside the colonel's station there, and talking to Woody Harrelson's character, and he's sort of chastising them about, we're basically seeing what an asshole the guy is. And while he's talking to them, and he's talking about the virus and how he shot his own son because he thought his son was infected with the simian flu virus, on the wall, they quickly pan over and the word history. You see the word history on the wall for no apparent reason. And Harrelson is just screaming his head off about something completely different. They want you to think about history. They want you to think about slavery. They want you to see these apes and chimps as black slaves. I'm sorry, but it is what it is, right? And Andy Serkis, he really wants you to think that they're slaves in actual fact. And so I guess that makes Woody Harrelson a kind of a Hitler character, doesn't it? Like a white fascist, tyrant. Here's another quote from Andy Serkis, and they're talking about the whipping scene that we were just talking about earlier. Here's what he said about it. That set was a horrible, horrible set to shoot on. It was. It reminded you of so many horrific events in history. Concentration camps, and it was a really nasty place. It had a horrible vibe. And that scene, it just kind of felt, I felt beholden to play him as someone who was going to stand up for his people, who was going to stand up for his kind. And it was physically kind of exhausting and quite painful. Okay, what's he talking about here? He's getting paid millions of dollars. He's acting like he really got sent to a concentration camp and really got whipped. And he's kind of acting like, he's talking about back in the day when he was a slave or something, which is ridiculous. He's a rich guy, okay? He can, he probably has a $1 million house. He probably owns several multi-million-dollar houses. He doesn't have to do this. There's people that would kill to be in his shoes. Now, the director, Matt Reeves, this is him talking about Andy during that scene. Listen to this. The thing that was amazing to watch was Andy. I mean, he's not being whipped, but he is. You can feel him being whipped. Andy wanted to be whipped and whipped. He was like, he goes, keep going, because he goes, I feel like I need to go through this. It was powerful because of the way Andy was expressing himself. You could feel his pain. You could feel the brutality. You were like, this is horrifying. So what are these two guys trying to do here with what they're saying? What is this like thinly veiled white guilt thing? Andy's dressing up like an ape or a chimp to pretend he's a black slave getting whipped, so he could express his white guilt for the audience or something like that. And the director just thinks it's great, and he's just driving it home. Yeah, he's like, keep going. I need to feel the pain. I need to get beat because I'm guilty because I'm white, and I need to know what it's like to be a slave. So just beat me down, please. So I want to talk about the hand gestures that the chimps and the apes do. And when we think about hand gestures, some of the more obvious ones that make an immediate impression on our minds is, the sign of the horns. When we see Anton LaVey, he was the founder of the Church of Satan, which, by the way, was originally called the Order of the Trapezoid. And we talked about the trapezoid earlier in the poster, right? A pyramid with the top chopped off. The Order of the Trapezoid became the Church of Satan. And the sign of the horns. And then we've got the Washington Monument next to Baphomet doing the as above, so below pose. Now the wizard does this too, the magician in the tarot. And Hitler, we have the Heil Hitler, the Nazi salute. And in the Pink Floyd movie, The Wall, we have Pink, when he's losing his mind, he goes into this fascist, montage nightmare thing where they're doing this cross arm thing that's kind of supposed to be like the Nazi salute. It's a metaphor for the Nazi salute. And then now you have the Black Panther Party. And this was their fist in the air thing. Now, what does that remind you of? Well, it's the same symbol BLM uses, fist in the air. And this was a militant organization, and they believed in open gun carry. And so you can see they have their guns right here. And why do they believe in open gun carry? Because they believe in the right to defend yourself. And I don't know everything about the Black Panthers. I'm not an expert in it, but I believe you should be able to defend yourself. Do I think people should be walking around with assault rifles? No, I don't. But I also don't think the guns should be taken away. This group, they also were fans of communism and socialism. And what do we have here? Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And what's he doing with his hand? What are they doing with their fists there? How many hints do we need to drop here before we start going, are these apes and chimps supposed to represent black people? How do you think these guys would feel if they found, if I went in a time machine and told them, hey, in the future, they're going to make Planet of the Apes movies, and all the apes and chimps are going to represent your enslaved forefathers. How do you think they'd feel? They'd probably pull their gun right on you. Now, here's one of the, now, as I said earlier, the simian flu virus makes the apes smarter, and it makes humans dumber. So the apes, a lot of them know sign language now, or they can talk. And this is their little salute that they do when they see each other, and it means ape strength or ape power. It's kind of a spiritual, kind of just like the Black Power thing, just like the Black Lives Matter thing. It's the same thing. Fist in the air, fist bump. So, they're reinforcing this on a lot of levels. One more note on the hand gestures. If the apes becoming smarter is symbolized by their ability to speak in sign language or in voice, what does it mean? What is the language of the apes? If the apes represent black slaves, if they represent black people, then their language is the language of black people, right? Well, then that makes it Ebonics. So the character Nova, the girl that goes with Caesar, the white girl, she doesn't know how to talk. She can't speak. She's mute. But she learns sign language. So she starts speaking the language of the chimps, the apes, the language of black people. She starts speaking in Ebonics. So she represents the white woman who wants to go and date black people, biracial couples. And they're trying to fire up the angst and the feelings of opposition that people might have to mixing races. but they're doing it in a very ugly, diabolical way. Now, going back to this character of Leon Rom, again, this was the brutal imperialist. Now, I read up on this a little bit, and apparently, to have your stronghold out in the Congo surrounded with severed heads wasn't even that abnormal. There was so much violence, slaves, arms, slave boys, hands being cut off, and just they didn't see them as human. And so, the critic of the book, he was talking about how it dehumanizes the Fang tribe in the Congo, and I can see that because they were dehumanized. History tells us they were, and the photos tell us as well. But this was kind of acceptable in that era of imperialism. And again, here he is in Tarzan. Leon Rom is played by this actor here. I forget his name. And now Andy Serkis, interestingly, right after the War for the Planet of the Apes came out, Black Panther came out. Not right after, but it was in the making while I was typing up this blog. And I couldn't help but notice that Andy Serkis is in it. And this is the guy who plays Caesar, the ape that gets whipped in War for the Planet of the Apes. But in this, he's playing Ulysses Klaue. Ulysses Klaue, Colonel Kurtz. He's kind of a Colonel Kurtz type character. Now, I'm not saying he's exactly the same character, but he's an imperialist, and he goes into the Congo and plunders natural resources. But it's instead of ivory tusks, it's like something else, some metal that he makes an arm out of. And I don't remember the whole story. I used to be a little more up on it, but it's just interesting. This actor goes from playing the lead chimp character who's supposed to be sort of the leader of the persecuted race from the Congo, and then he goes to playing the opposite, one of the imperialists, right after that. It's just, you can't make this stuff up. And again, this is a rubber plantation during the Belgium imperialist era. And look at this, it's just terrible. This is what they were doing, and this is what the apes are supposed to represent. There's a scene in the movie where they're all chained up just like this. And these guys are represented by the donkeys. I'm telling you, it's right in your face. And, everyone's going crazy right now with the George Floyd thing and defund the police. And now the narrative's been changed to, the hate against Asians because we've got this whole CCP, Chinese Communist Party thing happening. But that's a different topic. Won't get started on that. Anyhow, the last section here, we start talking about Black Panther a bit. Now, I mentioned the Black Panther Party earlier, and Black Panther, the comic book character, was created by Stan Lee. Stan Lee was white, and he just died recently. And he created Spider-Man and Iron Man and a whole bunch of other characters. And he created Black Panther in 1966, the exact same year the Black Panther Party appeared. I think they were called something else before that. And when he was asked about this coincidence, that's what he called it. He said, "Oh, it's just a coincidence." He denied that there was any connection. The wall. Now, this is a scene that doesn't even happen in the film. They never come through the wall like this. They come as slaves. But this symbol of the wall, around the same time, the Great Wall came out. Now, you ever been in the middle of a movie and thought to yourself, God, this movie's so awful. What am I doing here? I think we've all been there. And you just wonder, why was this movie even made? Well, I believe Matt Damon was asked, why did you do this movie, The Great Wall? And his answer was, I don't know. I believe that was the exact quote. So when this came out in 2016, this was when Trump got elected. And what was in the news? What was the big controversy? The wall on the Mexican border. And what's the great controversy right now as I'm talking? So this same issue is still here, that was happening at the same time. And you have Matt Damon. He's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and he's got red. What's red? What does that make you think of? Maybe the Republican Party? And then you've got blue over here, Democrat Party. And she looks Asian, right? Another famous wall was in Game of Thrones around the same time. And the wall plays a big part in that story. And it's to defend against who? The White Walkers, because the White Walkers are coming. The white people with blue eyes who eat babies. So in this final section, we talk about a little bit about transhumanism and posthumanism, which is something that I'm noticing people are finally starting to talk more about today, because we're just seeing it's getting harder and harder to deny this idea of wanting to chip everyone and get everyone, get prosthetics on every limb of your body, and dilute the idea of the sexual identities and all of this. So Andy Serkis said, that is the beauty of the technology. It does allow you. It's totally liberating. It allows you to play anything on this planet. You can anthropomorphize anything now. We have the capability of doing it. Anthropomorphizing is this process here, where he's they're going to transfer this, and all of his movements are going to be actually the chimp's movements later. So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about how great it is, how it liberates him. And then Matt Reeves said, I was a fan of the series from a child. I wanted to be an ape so badly. And when I saw Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I think he's talking about, I was particularly drawn to it because I'd never had that level of emotional identification with a CG character. So he's talking about emotional identification. Now, remember what I said earlier about how some of these actors never stop acting? Well, this is the director. And these directors, they also have to say certain things and not say other things. So he's sort of promoting the idea of making a role model out of a CG character. Now, I've done this too. I thought some of the characters from like Bugs Bunny and stuff were cool when I was a kid, but you grow up and no, I don't think I want to be a cartoon character anymore. But part of this whole thing about technology and making these movies where non-human creatures are the center of attention, are winning Academy Awards or what have you, this plays into the idea of artificial intelligence and artificial human and technology being superior to humans themselves. This is something very serious. That's you see all these women with all this work done, these young women who aren't even 18, they want to get breast augmentation. The over-sexualization of youth through the lure of technology. And you can be anything you want to be. It doesn't matter how old you are. I don't want to get too into that here. And so that's about it. Till next time. See you then.